Hey everybody, hope you're all doing alright out there. Today I want to talk about self-stabilising or self-balancing motorcycles, things that companies like Honda have been working on for a while. Before we get going, I just want to show you, explain the two ways that they can do this, or the two leading ways anyway. You've got the reaction wheel type, which is basically a big disc, big heavy disc spinning, which obviously has an inertia, and if you tilt that, you'll get some gyroscopic precession, which will help balance the bike. Another way that Honda came up with was not to have reaction wheels in, but they took the back end of the bike as in the swing arm, and it's got motors on it so it can turn. If you imagine the bike staying upright, the wheel will tilt left to right on the back to keep the bike upright. So you've got, actuators, motors, sensors and stuff in the swing arm, and the back end of the bike, and that can do this independently. So they're basically the two different systems, but I'm left with one question. Why? Why do they keep pursuing this angle? It's stupid. Let me explain. I'm not just calling it stupid and then walking on like 99% of the people are. I'm going to give you a well thought out breakdown as to why it's stupid. Okay, so let's look at the reaction wheel style one. You have to have two massive weights of metal in the bike, which have to be highly balanced on bearings, etc., etc. So this is a serviceable part. It's going to have a lot of weight to it for it to have any great effect, or you're going to have to spin them incredibly fast. They also are going to have to be placed. It's going to be difficult, the placement. If you put them in the absolute perfect sweet spot for centre of gravity in the bike, that maybe not be the best place for it when you want to have a rider on it and stuff. Alternatively, you can put it sort of lower down, but now you all of a sudden need a lot more weight and a lot more force to make the thing stand up because you haven't got the pivot. You're not above the pivot point of the wheels, so you haven't got that leverage. Now, presumably, we're also talking about electric motorcycles, so having these two heavy reaction wheels running in the bike, trying to keep it upright, will eat the battery. So who would give up, say, 15-20% of their range to have the bike stay upright on its own at very slow speeds? Below 12 miles an hour, basically, is where it's going to have any great effect, because anything above that, and you get counter steering by that point, so you're going to definitely get the gyroscopic effect of the wheels keeping you upright. So that system's a bit dumb. Then you've got the Honda system, which is changing the entire way the bike is built and the way that bikes have ever been built. The geometry on it just looks weird and wrong, and it's because they're trying to make something do something it's not. It's like taking an evening stiletto and converting it into a fishing wader. It may work, but it just doesn't look right. So to produce these bikes, they're going to have to completely ruin the geometry of motorcycles and what's come so far. Now, I'm not, back in the day it's the best way or anything like that, because I like electric bikes, and I think the fact that we can have very interesting different frame designs and things like that, because you don't have an internal combustion engine and fuel tank and radiation and all that, you just have a motor and a drive chain, or whatever method they're using to drive. If it's not, hub drives, they never got the torque. They're good for spinning, but they just don't have the torque. So basically we're talking about completely redesigning the motorcycle itself, not for, optimum handling, not for optimum cornering or comfort. It's for the fact that you don't need to balance it below about 12 miles an hour. And as I've proven before many, many times, you don't need auto-stabilising and stuff like that to stop on a bike with your feet up. It just takes... Now, admittedly, if you hit the traffic lights, you can't do this the whole time. But, generally, that's not a problem. I don't get it. Look, I'm coming up to the line. I've stopped. I'm looking around. My legs are still in the air. You're right, I went wiggly because I was just looking down. Point is, no one needs a bike that can self-balance. You want a bike that self-balances? Stick a third wheel on it. What's wrong with doing that? If you want a bike that can stand up on its own, if it's that important for you, because presumably you're in a city and you're in start-stop traffic, get one of the MP3 things, the three-wheelers. Now, as I've said before, I'm not against future technologies. I'm not like, I don't get it, I don't like it. I get it, I know why they're pursuing this to a point, but I don't see the end result. Where is that going to go? What is that going to do? When what you could do was put all of this effort of, engineering and R&D and everything into things like making the bike less easy to steal. because the selling point of a bike being able to balance itself is kind of weak. It only really applies to people who are maybe scared of riding bikes, don't have the ability or the skill to do it. And when I say the ability, I mean there are disabled people out there who ride bikes still, and if they could have a bike that they didn't need to have one of these like auto pop-out kickstands or something like that, fine, I get it. For them, makes perfect sense, but they are a small percentage in the market, and Honda is not going to go through this much effort to help out, what, a few thousand people worldwide maybe? And I'm saying a few thousand in the sense of people who actually do still ride. Not ones that say they would, but ones who currently push themselves to do it. Well, then maybe if they didn't have to push themselves, more many people would do it. But I just don't, you know, Honda have been making or playing with self-balancing stuff for years. And okay, when it applies to other stuff, maybe it makes more sense. When it comes to motorcycles, I can't help but think to myself, what could have been better if you put that much money and R&D into it? I mean, maybe they didn't. Maybe there hasn't been this much. Maybe it's a very small team, and if you're doing like future-based research engineering, you do need to push the envelope. You need to do ridiculous stuff, because it's in those places you learn some lessons you wouldn't have learned in the more mundane, normal expectation stuff. So as I say, I appreciate maybe there's more to this than I've realised, but I don't see it. While I was looking into this, I did find, one of these classic channels, over 1 million subscribers, taking some footage from someone else and talking over it like they know what they're talking about. Was saying the reason that Honda wanted to do this is because it's very fatiguing on the rider to keep holding the bike up, and also it's difficult to hold the bike up at a standstill in strong winds. It amazes me how many people, or how many, social media accounts there are about engineering or this, that, the other subject, and you very quickly realise the person who runs the page has very little understanding of the subject matter in any nuanced way. It's quite hysterical, really. So, self-balancing motorcycles, to me, as I say, I don't have a problem with it if it existed. I just feel like it's pointless. I don't understand the why. It's that classic thing. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Do you need to spend this time trying to develop a self-balancing motorcycle? Is there anything in the future that would actually appreciably be better with that? That a single third wheel wouldn't solve? Unless you've got the idea of selling motorcycles to people who can't keep a bike upright. If you can't keep a bike upright at the lights because of anything other than, physical disabilities, then you shouldn't be riding a bike. It's again that trying to make something easier, always trying to make something easier for people. You shouldn't be making that level of entry lower for people on things like motorcycles. Motorcycles get people killed if they're not careful. Cars tend to look after you even if you're dumb. It's like lathes. They don't make, my first lathe for kids, because you will lose limbs immediately without knowing a few basic rules. Well, not limbs, but you know what I'm saying. You're definitely going to lose an appendage or two. I say that, but if it was like the 90s still, these days we'd have my first laser engraver, my first CNC mill. Because I'm telling you now, the chemistry sets we had back then, there was some nasty stuff in them. And of course, what are kids going to do when you give them a chemistry set? Mix everything. Anyway, getting off subject here. So yeah, self-stabilising, self-balancing bikes. Do you see a point in them? Do you understand why they exist? Do you think that I've missed something here? Do you think it's a good way to spend R&D money? Or is there things that are more pressing that people might care about more? At the end of the day, companies may be interested in safety, but really what they're interested in is making the moolah. And making the moolah means getting things that people want, or building things and then telling them that they want them, and then convincing them, and they self-convince themselves that I do want this thing because they told me I want it. Oh my god, why didn't I get this before? Why didn't I know? And then they go and buy it. And then realise it was a bit of a letdown. As I say, I don't get why a company would be pursuing something like this, because it's not going to lead to massive sales. Or maybe it's just for getting themselves in the newspaper occasionally. Who knows? Oh, so you're not... Talking the moolah, if you want to help support this channel, please do that through Patreon. I massively appreciate it. Like the video if you liked it, comments below, catch you in the next one.